Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have a newly elected State Senator Rob Teplitz from the central Pennsylvania area on the program. He's formed the Reform Caucus. Now, I know what you're thinking. Reform and Pennsylvania government may not go in the same sentence, but Senator Teplitz is here to help us out. And then we're going to have our business panel. All of that follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, joining me is State Senator Rob Teplitz. He's from the 15th District. Translation, a bunch of counties in south central Pennsylvania. I got that about right, don't you? I won't go into all of them. We're glad to have you on the program. Well, you, along with State Representative Brian Cutler, a Republican from Lancaster County, formed the Reform Caucus. I joked about it, but there have been some, I think good changes made since the infamous pay hike of 2005. And you've got a lot of ideas out there that I think are generating some excitement in your Reform Caucus. What I want to do is have you talk about a few of them and why you think these are something that the state legislature should do. So if you had to mention the top two or three, what would they be?
Well, I think this issue is very important. If there is one good thing that came out of Bonusgate and the pay grab of 2005 and the scandal since, it's that the public is more engaged and is demanding reform. We formed a caucus, bipartisan, bicameral, both houses, in order to develop reform proposals, promote them, and get them translated into law. Okay. Some of my top priorities: ensuring that there's an independent audit of the General Assembly and its legislative slush fund, the money that led to Bonusgate, that the Auditor General has the power to do that. Under current law, he doesn't. Ending the automatic annual midterm COLAs for legislators, preventing legislators and the governor from being paid if a state budget is not passed on time, opening up primaries to independent voters so that they have access to be able to weigh in on who the major party candidates are, and other types of reforms that deal with fiscal responsibility, accountability, openness and transparency, and inclusion in the electoral process.
Over the years, and I spent a lot of years, studying Pennsylvania government and writing about it, yapping about it to folks like you, I think a lot of people come with great ideas, and we don't endorse ideas here, it's not my job, but they get caught up in the culture. And so pretty easy it's soon to, I want this bill through, or I want some help on something for my constituents, and all of a sudden it gets sidetracked because, there's institutional bias. It just doesn't allow this to happen. But you've got Republicans. I mean, this has to be bipartisan, doesn't it?
I think the nature of what we're trying to accomplish requires that it be bipartisan and that involve both houses, and that those of us who believe in reform also lead by example. I'm not taking any per diems, no car, no mileage reimbursements.
Not reducing the size of the legislature.
I support that, absolutely. I co-sponsored a bill to reduce the size of the legislature. I don't think that is going to be accomplished our first year, but we're going to try to get some things done that are doable.
And maybe that's not, of the things you've promoted, I mean, that's not the worst thing that Pennsylvania government does, is have a legislature that's a little big. I think you would agree. Well, I think most of our viewers would be stunned to know that the Auditor General that audits the books of all areas of state government is precluded from auditing the General Assembly. Did that strike you when you were elected, when you found that out?
Well, I knew that from my prior life. I was chief counsel at the Auditor General's office for the last 8 years, and unfortunately, I found out in the course of that job, state law prevents the Auditor General from auditing the legislative branch and also, by the way, the judicial branch. I think it's important that the legislative books be opened up. If that slush fund hadn't existed or had transparency to it, we may never have had Bonusgate. So it's very important that we make that change.
Now, for you want to make sure that lawmakers aren't paid if the budget's not passed on time. During Governor Rendell's years, for 8 straight years, the legislature did not pass the budget on time. We don't have to assess the blame here. For 6 of them, of his 8 years, the Republicans controlled the General Assembly. Then in the last 2 years, the House was Democratic. So I don't know that it's a Democratic-Republican thing. It's just these issues are tough. What do your lawmakers say about, well, we're not going to pay your colleagues?
Well, some of them aren't that thrilled with that and some of my other proposals, but many of the newer legislators are very supportive. It's not a matter of party in terms of support for these issues. It seems to be more how long you've been in the legislature.
Right.
And so I think we'll be making progress the longer we move forward, but it's important that we create a culture of reform, not just for its own sake, because it's the right thing to do, but I believe that the way things happen in the Capitol drives the results. And we'll get better results and be able to deal with education, healthcare, jobs, infrastructure, and other important issues if we can make progress on reform.
All right, I'm talking with State Senator Rob Teplitz and his reform agenda. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, a huge contentious issue over the course of decades has been open primaries. I want to talk to him about that. I get lots of email personally and calls about that. Should we have open primaries? We'll tell you what that means. At least Senator Teplitz will, following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to the program with State Senator Rob Teplitz. We're talking about his reform agenda. These are issues and items that have come up over the course of the years. The senator has a reform caucus, Democrats and Republicans, where they're trying to bring about some change. Open primaries. Both parties have not been enthralled with this. They want to have these, what do I call them, intramural fights. In other words, fight within their own parties for the nomination. So talk about what you want to do there.
Sure. What I've tried to do is be responsive to my constituents. And what I heard a lot last year from registered independents is that they would like to be able to weigh in on who the nominees are for a particular party. They don't necessarily want to commit themselves to being a Republican or a Democrat, but they want to weigh in on those choices. There's a movement for open primaries. Our bill would allow a registered independent to basically choose which party to register for that day, go into the voting booth, vote in that primary, and then the registration would expire.
Now, they couldn't pick an office, like I'll vote for Gov for primary on the Republican side and a state senator, a Democrat. You wouldn't allow them to do that.
That's
They'd
right.
have to pick one.
They would have to pick a party. And as you said before, some of the political people are not happy about that. I heard from, party activists that I respect who aren't who aren't happy about it. But it's the right thing to do. We need to find ways to get people more engaged in the process, not be so exclusive.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears a bit, the governor has a proposal to privatize the management of the lottery, and you think that if that goes through, my hunch is that a lot of Democrats aren't going to vote for it because I've interviewed some and talked with some, and if you want to tell me what you'll do, that's great. But you think if it does go through, they should be prohibited from making campaign contributions. Is that correct?
That's right. I oppose the privatization of management of the lottery for a whole host of reasons. The Attorney General cited some of those reasons when she rejected the contract. And it's also important to recognize half of the lottery's employees live in this area. Right. And so these are our friends and neighbors. We don't want their jobs affected. But on the direct issue, the same rules that apply to casinos and casino involvement in politics should apply to a lottery manager. And so that's one of the bills that we've recently introduced.
Okay, I know we're going through a bunch of issues, but these are all pretty important, and they're before the legislature now. I talked last week with a couple of reporters who gave us an update on this whole business of getting rid of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, folding it into the, are you in favor of that?
I'm open to that. I mean, certainly there's an issue with how we fund transportation and infrastructure in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Using the turnpike and saddling it with debt in order to do that has been the wrong approach.
Like $20 billion. I could be wrong about the exact amount.
Yeah, it's why our tolls have gone up recently.
Right.
But the scandals at the turnpike recently, I think, force us to take a second look as to whether having an independent turnpike commission has outlived its usefulness.
Yeah. So at any rate, it seems like that a bunch of House Republicans have put that bill forward. I didn't see any Democrats. I don't know whether it'll end up being partisan or not. That actually, over the years, it's been more of a Senate issue. That folks who have been involved in that have been more involved with senators. So we'll happen to see. Lastly, before I let you go, I have to ask you this question because it's going to be a huge issue, and you're probably going to have to put up a vote on it. What about the funding of transportation? Every study says, and Democrats and Republicans are on board on this because I've interviewed and talked with them, we got to do something about roads and bridges and mass transit. Do you like the bigger plan, $2.5 billion, that Senator Rafferty came up with, or the smaller plan that Governor Corbett has, which is about $1 billion short of that? Which one of those do you like?
I would be inclined towards a bigger plan. It is a crucial issue. It's a public safety issue and a jobs issue. Right. What I want to make sure of in terms of committing to a vote on a particular plan is, are we funding projects in this area that my constituents are going to benefit from?
Yeah, that seems to be true for most lawmakers. They don't mind putting up a fee, a tax vote, as we're likely to see. Registration and license fees might increase under the proposal. Oil franchise tax, which you could pass along, so we'll pay more. So your point and other lawmakers are, you want to make sure your constituents get a reasonable or fair, whatever that means. You know more about that than I do. Amount of the construction and bridge repair money, correct?
Yes. I mean, we need to make sure that we're not imposing a huge financial burden on taxpayers, but I certainly would not want to send our tax money out to other parts of the state. I want to make sure that we get some important projects done in this area. So that's what I'll be looking for my support.
All right. Well, thanks. Great update. You're welcome to come on. We had Senator Picola on, so we're not bipartisan. We're nonpartisan, a Republican, and he replaced him in the state Senate. Our all-star business panel is up. We're going to get the views of the business community on some important subjects after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. Well, we're time for our monthly business panel. Joining me is Sam Denisco. He's the VP of Government Affairs at the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and Dave Taylor, he's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Dave, let's pick up on the Senator Teplitz conversation. I mean, this is one thing where, business and labor agree. I mean, I noticed all the press conferences, labor and business folks all together on this. Do you have a position on the size of the dollars that should be put into this, into transportation?
We're talking about transportation. I mean, certainly there's a large public need, and I think that Secretary Shoke makes the case well to say that there are costs that are associated with doing nothing. It's not a choice between finding the revenues and just standing pat, because our infrastructure is being ground down by traffic and usage day by day. So again, the governor and the plan that he put forward, was more modest, and that that there was emphasis on on mercy on the taxpayer and the affordability of the plan. I think Secretary Shouk makes the case well that we have an expanding public need based on a diminishing revenue stream, and so I mean there is ground to give in the governor's plan, and so my expectation would be that
I think he has said the same thing. He's been tell me. Sam, he has been a little flexible on that. I mean, the fact that the Transportation Secretary was at this big press conference also indicates what? Do you suspect flexibility without being, honing in on a number?
Right. I think there's a great deal of flexibility with this plan. When the governor wanted to set the standard and say, here's my plan, we're beginning the conversation, and that conversation was picked up in the Senate. This is a core function of state government. It's our transportation funding needs, and the reality is that the funding's been stagnant for a long time, and we got to keep up the pace.
And it's a safety issue. I mean, one of the things that I've been hearing more and more, when we started to do program on this about 2 years ago, there have been several commissions that have looked at it. Even Governor Corbett had one, and they vary in what they recommend. In term, 2.5 billion, some a little higher. But of late, I've been hearing more and more about, the business needs. But safety. I mean, issues have now come up, and the Transportation Secretary has talked about that. Yes?
No, there's no question that when you have, again, we have our infrastructure stagnant, hasn't been kept up properly, and that it's a sign of our growing economy, growing population, more activity, that the transportation system gets more use. And I think everyone's nightmare is to find themselves in a situation like what happened in Minneapolis, where we had a major catastrophic failure. And the more you hear about deficient bridges in Pennsylvania, again, that doesn't mean that they're set to collapse. But the longer we do nothing, the more our infrastructure ages in place, the greater that possibility becomes.
Now, last week I had a couple of reporters on the program, and we were talking about this, and I asked them the question I'm going to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Sam. The prospect for passage, we've been down this road before. The Senate seems, and you're up on the Hill here in Harrisburg, prospect in the Senate seems stronger than in the House. If you had to assess the prospects for passage of something, whether it's the governor's plan or the bigger plan proposed by Senator Rafferty, how would you assess it?
I think the prospects are very high, and it's evident in, as you refer to, the folks on the stage at the press conference. You couldn't even get on that stage. There were so many business, labor, politicians, whatnot, policymakers. I believe there's the attitude is to get it done. I think it's going to be a little more of a struggle in the House because some of those funding needs can be construed as a tax increase, and exactly. And there's some lawmakers that have taken a no tax pledge, and so that needs to be overcome. But I think in the end, the numbers will be there. What the proposal exactly would entail, fees, renewals, the tax cap on the oil companies. That's all part of the picture.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I'll come back and I'll ask Dave Taylor the same question, but we're going to talk about the important issue of liquor privatization. It's a priority for the governor and many folks in the business community. Will the state privatize liquor stores, or guess what? Modernize them, keep the system, but modernize, privatize, modernize, that's the debate. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Sam Denisco and Dave Taylor, the representative of the business community. David, privatization, it passed the House, would take, literally within a period of time end the state monopoly over the liquor store operation. The Senate doesn't quite seem to be on the same page. More senators talking about modernizing. What's your sense about where that goes?
Well, I think that there's tremendous momentum behind selling off the state store system. It's 80 years since Prohibition ended, and that Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states, us and Utah, to have a total control system. It's archaic, it's obsolete, and the public wants it gone. I think that the House vote was a real vote of confidence. There's great momentum behind this, and as we were talking about the prospects of passage, final passage of a transportation package, there's no doubt that the House Majority Leader, Mr. Terzai, is going to require the Senate to approve the governor's liquor plan before a transportation bill moves through the House.
Now let me think about this a minute. You've got a big smile on your face. No deals, right? Sam? They wouldn't make a deal like, I'll give you what you want. You know, the House will get its version of privatization and the Senate will get its version of transportation. You would never expect anything like that.
We would never expect it. Dave and I have been around town for quite some time that we know that, the conversations are being had about who wants what at this point, and as we know that this needs all to get wrapped up by the end of June, where we have to pass a balanced budget. So I think, as Dave said, transportation is a core function of state government. Selling booze really isn't, and we need to get out of the business.
So both of your organizations have been in favor. We've on this program we've put people for and against, as you would expect us to do. So are both of you optimistic about? I ask you about transportation. Liquor privatization seems to me, just in terms of what I've heard, a slightly tougher road because of the strong. Or am I making that up?
I think that in the end, all of this gets done. We get the budget done, we get the state store sold off, we get a good, robust transportation plan. I think that we also take consequential steps towards reforming the public pension system. I think all these things get done. And again, these parts are all interrelated, they're all moving at the same time, but it's at this point, it's pretty clear envisioning how it's all going to play out.
It would be pretty historic for the legislature to take up the issues that in the next, what do we got now? Is this end of April? We're talking, about basically 2 months? That would be pretty historic. You've covered this stuff for a long time.
These are major issues of public policy, and we commend, Dave's organization commended the governor for really taking this on, transportation, pensions, liquor, tax reform. These are major issues, and I think the governor's done a great job in talking with the legislative leaders to get the conversation moving and getting things to and across the finish line.
Right. Now, before we have about 40 seconds left, pass a budget on time? We don't even talk about that anymore since they've all, taken the great pledge, right, that we'll never have another 8 years without a state budget passed on time.
We've got another year of fiscal discipline under our belt where the growth in government is held just to the growth in revenues. That we're getting into a virtuous cycle where the private economy is growing faster than the government, and that is, I think, a hallmark of Governor Corbett's leadership and a key factor in Pennsylvania's economic success.
All right, thanks for coming in and doing your update, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next week, and as always, stay well.